Today we're transforming a head of cabbage into a seriously delicious Indian spiced curry. Cabbage is cooked down until it's silky and tender, then paired with warming spices and chickpeas, and simmered until rich and creamy. So let's get started by breaking down our cabbage. We're gonna start by slicing our cabbage in half lengthwise, right through the core. And from here, I just like to slice it into quarters to make it easier to slice. Once you get to the core, you can go ahead and slice that out because that's quite tough. You want to slice the cabbage about as thinly as you can. Green cabbage is one of the most budget-friendly vegetables you can buy at the grocery store, and it's rich in fiber and antioxidants, but I feel like it doesn't get a lot of love. People kind of think it's boring, but the way we're gonna cook it today, it's gonna get tender and buttery and silky, gonna kind of melt into the curry. It's gonna be so delicious. And for this recipe, you want about 400 grams of shredded cabbage, which is roughly 8 cups. We've got a few aromatics to complement our cabbage. We've got some serrano peppers and 4 garlic cloves. 4 fat garlic cloves, I should say. We'll just chop up the garlic and then finally chop the serrano peppers. I'm using 2 serrano peppers today, and that's gonna give us a nice noticeable heat without being overpoweringly spicy. But if you've got baby mouth, no worries. You can always use 1 pepper and scrape out the fleshy white membranes because that's where most of the heat lives. One more thing to chop before we start cooking. We've got some fresh tomatoes, about half a pound, and if it's not tomato season where you are, you can't find good tomatoes, go ahead and use the same amount of crushed canned tomatoes. And I like to finely chop the tomatoes so they kind of meld into the curry and you don't get distinct tomato pieces. It does take a few minutes, so if you want to speed things up, you can pop these in a mini food processor and puree them. Everything is prepped, so let's start cooking. Before we get to cooking, I do have a confession to make. The first time we filmed this cooking section, our audio equipment malfunctioned, but I didn't notice until about a week later. So if you see the next section and there are a couple things that look a little different, like there's a whole new oven because our oven also malfunctioned, just keep that in mind. All right, back to the video and this delicious recipe. Okay, take 2. You're gonna get a large saute pan over medium-high heat, and you really want a saute pan with these high sides because if you have a shallow frying pan, stuff will definitely spill out over the sides. And if you don't have a wide 12-inch saute pan like this, you can use a Dutch oven instead. After a couple minutes, you can go ahead and add your oil. This is avocado oil, but any neutral oil you like is fine. And once you start to see the oil shimmering, you know it's time to add your first ingredient, and we're gonna go in with our serrano pepper and garlic. And you want to keep things moving pretty quickly so the garlic doesn't burn. It really just needs 30 to 60 seconds to release some of that aroma and fragrance, but you don't want it to brown. That is a spicy serrano pepper, I can already tell you that. Time to add all of this cabbage, and it's gonna look like a lot, but I promise it will cook down. I find it helpful to take some tongs and really toss the cabbage into the oil. You don't want the garlic and serrano pepper to just be on the bottom of the pot because they might burn that way. Oh no. Cabbage down. Oh, almost forgot. We need some salt. And the beauty of this recipe is that everything cooks in one pot, so there are minimal dishes to clean up. And the goal with this technique is to cook the cabbage down until it's super silky and soft and starting to brown in spots. And that process is going to release the natural sugars in the cabbage, so it tastes better, but it's also going to develop that melt in your mouth texture. The cabbage needs about 10 minutes to cook down, so in the meantime, I'm gonna go measure out my spices. We're sticking with ground spices today because I wanted to keep this recipe weeknight friendly and beginner friendly. We'll mix together 1.5 teaspoons each of ground coriander and cumin, a half teaspoon of turmeric, and 2 teaspoons of Kashmiri chili powder. This is a mild Indian chili powder with a beautiful red color and some nice flavor, but if you don't have it, I'll include a substitute right here. And of course, some salt and lots of black pepper to season. Once your cabbage looks like this, super tender with a little bit of browning around the edges, you can go ahead and add the spices. And I'm also adding 2 tablespoons of tomato paste to our spice mixture. And you want to stir almost constantly for 2 minutes. If it starts to dry out, just add a splash of water. And the tomato paste is just going to add like a sweet, savory oomph and give this dish a bit more complexity and flavor. Be sure to stir almost constantly to cook off the tomato paste and to ensure the spices don't burn. Kind of looks like kimchi, weirdly enough, at this point. So I'm gonna go ahead and add our diced tomatoes. And you can use the tomato juices to scrape up any brown bits stuck on the bottom of the pot. After 4 to 5 minutes, you should start to see a homogenized mixture where the tomatoes are melding into everything else and not as distinct in pieces. And now we can add the rest of the ingredients. 1 can of chickpeas that I've drained and rinsed. And this is just gonna give the dish a little more heft and fiber and protein so it feels like a more well-balanced meal. A can of full-fat coconut milk. A bit of salt. And my secret ingredient, a little bit of almond butter. This is inspired by my most popular recipe, my red lentil curry, which many of you have made. And you don't taste the almond butter, but it does add this really lovely nutty indulgence. It just makes it extra complex and flavorful and makes you kind of forget that you're eating a bunch of cabbage. And be sure to stir this well so that you don't end up with little clumps of almond butter. And we'll simmer this for 20 minutes uncovered, and that'll give the ingredients a chance to cozy up to one another, the coconut flavor will cook off, and it'll thicken and get even creamier. We have just a couple minutes left on the curry, so I'm gonna take that time to prep our finishing ingredients, and these are super important, so do not skip them. I'm gonna chop a big handful of cilantro for some freshness. It smells incredible, and it's looking perfect at this point, so I'm gonna kill the heat. If you do prefer a looser or saucier consistency, you can always add like 1/4 or 1/2 cup of water. I'm gonna stir in a teaspoon of garam masala, just a nice finishing, slightly sweet warmth. Add in all of this cilantro. And a few squeezes of lime juice just to brighten everything up. If all you have at home is lemon, totally fine, use that. Of course, you can serve this with rice, but I have some of my leftover vegan naan in the freezer, and normally I would heat it up in a cast iron pan, but I am just really anxious to start eating. I'm so hungry, so I'm just gonna pop it in the microwave. A little more cilantro for color, and because I love it. Eating time, big ol' scoop. That is unbelievably good, and I know you're gonna love it. You can find the full written recipe linked in the description box below the video, or you can scan the QR code. And if you want to make the vegan naan to go alongside with that, I'll include that video right here. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!